Hello, everybody. We are on the finish line here at our Checkly launch week, and it is again time to launch. But before we get into our topic today, which is SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, I want, as always, do a little bit of housekeeping. So we want you to be part of the session. So please introduce yourself. Let us know if you have any questions, comments on the topic of security of SOC 2. And as I like to embarrass myself with dad jokes and dev puns, I'm going to kick it off with my one here for today. So it will be a session full of sock puns. So get ready. So what is a bear without socks? It's not a dev pun, but still a dad joke. It's barefoot. So with that, let me just introduce Checkly to the people that don't know about Checkly yet. Checkly allows you to build and run synthetic monitoring that scales. So if you're building and maintaining public APIs that are out there and you want to make sure that they're up and running and fast enough at all times, you can leverage Checkly and our API checks to test and monitor your APIs around the world. And if you also build a product or website or a web app out there, you can use our browser check feature and control headless Chrome using Playwright and make sure that all your essential user flows are actually working as they are supposed to do. And we have hit a major milestone last week. So far, we've run over 5 billion check runs. And you do see that, right? This is 9 zeros. And this boils down to 4.5 billion API checks and 0.5 billion browser checks. And even though there is a zero, this still is 500 million times that Checkly controlled headless Chrome to check if a website is actually working. And I think these numbers are just mind-boggling, and I'm happy to tell you that we are off to the next 5 billion. So we are here at launch week. It is our second one, and we had a full week a week full of feature releases. On Monday, we talked about monitoring as code with Tim and Chris. Then I had Jan on Tuesday on, and we discussed what our native Playwright test support looks like and how you can now leverage all the goodies of Playwright tests in our Checkly UI. We're talking here videos, we're talking traces, we're talking the test runner. Then yesterday, I had Nawel and Pilar with me, and we discussed and showed you how you can visualize and make all your check result data transparent using our new public dashboards and our new analytics API. And today we're going to talk about SOC 2 Type 2 compliance. And I have Daniel, our Director of Engineering, with me in just a minute. But as already mentioned, we now kicked off monitoring as code. It is the theme of this week, and it is Checkly's theme going forward from now on. But what does that actually mean? So with the introduction of our new Checkly CLI that is now in public beta, you can define all your monitoring and testing resources. Let it be browser checks, API checks, alert channels in code, and you can put it into your version control and put it next to the application code that you are writing every day. And then when you're getting ready to ship to production, you can also use our infrastructure to test all your API endpoints, all your applications that are sitting on a staging environment or in a preview environment, and make sure that you are 100% certain that everything works properly with the CLI using Checkly test. And once you hit the deploy button, you can now leverage Checkly deploy to make all your tested resources or all the API checks and browser checks into actual monitoring and get the confidence that all your things are working as they should. And if they're not, we at Checkly will let you know so that you can be on top of your game. And to celebrate monitoring as code, we are doing the upcoming weeks a home office makeover. So if this sounds interesting to you, what you can do is you can play around with the CLI, let us know how it goes, give us feedback. And if you're working on a public project, or let it be your website, an open source project, and you implement our new monitoring as code workflows, all you have to do is you have to put a GitHub README badge into your project or onto your project and let us know. And then you have the chance to win a home office giveaway or a makeover worth $500. It could be a pair of headphones, a monitor, a keyboard. It is really up to you. So if there's something that you desperately need in your home office, maybe this is for you. And as we're talking security and SOC 2 Type 2 today, so SOC 2 is the theme of the topic. And if you want to level up your SOC game and participate in chat, I had a lot of fun designing this beautiful slide. So if you have any questions, all you have to do is participate in chat. Let us know. Let us have some fun about security. And we will pick a lucky winner at the end of the session who then can win this beautiful red pair of socks. So if you're confused which leg is number 1 and number 2, maybe this pair of socks will be helpful. And oh my goodness, I think we have to move on from this slide over here. So I'm jumping onto a serious note, and let me all introduce you to Daniel, our Director of Engineering. Daniel, how is life, my friend?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the intro, Stefan. So life is good. And yeah, I'm Daniel, Director of Engineering at Checkly. I lead our engineering teams, and also I have been responsible for our SOC 2 compliance process.
And we are now SOC 2 compliant. And I'm mainly using SOC 2 here for a lot of puns. But can you tell me what SOC 2 is and what it is all about?
Yes, of course. So SOC 2 is a framework to ensure companies implement safety and privacy of customer data, right? And then also a high level of information security. And to make it a little less abstract, I brought a couple of examples what that actually means. So for example, what we're doing now, whenever we use third-party services, we either review their SOC 2 policies, or if they're not SOC 2 compliant themselves, we request their security documentation, right, to make sure that all the vendors we use are up to our standards. And then also, I think an interesting point is we strictly separate production from staging and dev environments, right? So no customer data ever gets used for testing purposes or for development purposes. A couple of other things are we have incident response procedures, of course, documented and regularly exercised. And there are many more. I think it's over 100 security controls that we are audited for and that we have to fulfill.
That is definitely a lot. But let me ask you, we talked about SOC 2 already, like at last launch week. What changed from August to February here at Checkly?
Yes, so last year we did the Type 1 audit, and basically what that means is that the company proved that we can fulfill all the standards, right? So we had the ramp up phase, we documented everything, created the policies, put the security program in place, and that was what happened last year. And now this year, our auditors ensured that all of these system controls and security controls are active over a period of time, right? So you don't only show you can do it once, but you have to prove that you can keep them active and going over multiple months. And I'm very happy to say that we passed the audit without any complaints or deviations. So good job everyone involved. And then what did we have to do? So basically we enforced and promoted and informed people again and again about what is written down in our security policies, right? So this entails, for example, proper employee onboarding, offboarding, documentation of permissions granted and taken away from production systems, which is super important. And also, I think this is interesting. If we get security issues, we have internal SLAs that tell us how fast we have to resolve them based on severity, right? And we had to also prove to auditors that we had some, and then we fixed them within our SLAs. Yeah.
So when I learned about all these things, most of these things kind of boil down to people, and it's very, very hard to kind of really get into this practice of following certain standards, having all these processes in place. For me, the most tangible thing is probably, especially onboarding, offboarding, right? There are so many things to do. How do we handle all that?
Yeah, so luckily, our head of people, Kaylee, she's very engaged with this, and she prepared a super cool process with a document for managers when new employees join, right? And you have all the steps necessary, all the access that they need, documented so managers can follow up. And in parallel, we create an IT onboarding ticket in our ticket system that basically documents all the access somebody needs and is getting. Same goes for offboarding. There's a ticket created in our ticket system, and you can see like everything that needs to be taken away. And of course, usually we start with the critical stuff, right? So GitHub, production, Amazon, these things,
sure.
database, Google Suite, and yeah, then afterwards the secondary systems and third-party vendors are coming.
Yeah, I mean, for these kind of things, checklists and definitely automation helped, right? Because there are so many things to do. It has to be easy to do the right thing, right? And I know that you and Kaylee, our head of people, are pretty much on top of their game there. So it's good to know that we are in good hand here. But I can imagine that things are very easily forgotten. And we talked a little bit about onboarding and offboarding. What else could become a risk?
Yes. So especially during offboarding, right? So this is one thing when employees leave, the first idea is always, oh, will they take revenge on the company? But this is not a concern for us, right? We must take steps, of course, after they leave. So for example, every employee, when they leave, they have to send in their machine so we can wipe it, even if they want to keep it. And the idea is, of course, what typically happens or what can happen is, you have this machine, and if it's not wiped and access is not tightly controlled, it can happen that you have these like lingering database credentials on the machine, and then let's say a year later or something, it gets stolen or it gets compromised with some malware, and suddenly a malicious actor can have access to our production systems and our passwords. And so this is why you have to have all these processes in place, and people send in their machines, we wipe them, and we take away access pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredibly hard to do, right? Because we all work in tech, right? I have my phone literally here. We have data and sensitive stuff in all places pretty much. It's my computer, it's my phone. But let's talk about the technical side of things. What does SOC 2 mean for us and our tech infra?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a very interesting question. So we have an ongoing security program that is, not all of it is strictly part of SOC 2, but also it's just us thinking, what can we do better in terms of security? And one thing I think that stands out is for the first time, Checkly underwent a manual pen test by a third-party pen tester this year. And that was a really interesting 2-week process where someone really tested our systems. And I'm super happy that we only had 5 findings. An informational one, 3 low severity, and 1 medium SEV one. And the medium SEV was basically fixed 2 days after it was reported.
I don't know what happened here, Daniel. I am super
Were
sorry.
you hacked, Stefan?
I don't know. My camera just disconnected. But let's move on. We had the first pen test. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I don't know how much you heard, right? I'm just going to repeat it. So we had the first manual pen test, right? And TLDR is, I'm super happy that we only had 5 findings. 1 informational, 3 low SEV, and 1 medium SEV. And the medium severity we basically fixed 2 days after it was discovered. So yeah, that went pretty well.
So tell me about pen tests in general, right? So I assume do you give someone a call like a hoodie hacker? How does pen testing actually work in general?
Yes, that's pretty much how it works, right? So you request someone with a black hoodie specifically because that's what real hackers look like. Um, of course not.
I heard about
Uh,
that.
no, what you do is you basically go through the market, right? There's different vendors, and you compare the ones, what they offer and how they do it, and then you pick one that you think can do the best pen test. And then usually, in our case, I wanted to have a more gray box approach, right? So you can have a black box approach where you tell nothing about the system and it's completely unknown to the hackers, so they have to do a lot of reconnaissance and discovery. And then you have the white box approach, of course, where you share the source code and they can see everything. In our case, I thought having more of a gray box would be nice, right? So I shared details of the application and infra. So, right, like which Node.js versions are we using, which dependencies, which libraries, what's the database, what version, etc. So we don't, have like a ton of time wasted on scanning for PHP vulnerabilities in a Node.js backend.
Yeah.
And then I could also give focus areas. And one I think that is pretty interesting for Checkly in particular. If you think about it from a security perspective, we basically allow people to run their own code inside of our infra, right? So people can type whatever they want. Most of them hopefully only browser checks, but it's technically not limited. So this is why we have multiple layers of sandboxing to ensure that nothing bad can happen. And this was, for example, something I wanted the pen tester to put some focus on, right? Can you escape the sandbox?
Yeah. For sure. This seems kind of like the obvious thing, right? When I, as a hoodie hacker, would kind of understand, wait, I can run code in a common infra around the planet. I mean, that's pretty interesting. Is it common for SOC 2 to do gray box testing?
So it's pretty much up to you, right? So you can do the pen test the way you want. The requirement from our auditors and from the whole process was basically have a pen test performed, but the specifics were up to us.
And now, as I think this is very interesting, right? So I'm a podcast listener, and I'm listening, for example, to Darknet Diaries. Wonderful podcast. I think it's super nice. Did this pen test also include kind of people snooping into around our office, do tailgating, and all these kind of things that I keep hearing about?
Well, not really, because Checkly is a fully remote company, right? So there's not like technically an office that they could go to. And also doing social engineering was not part of the whole process. However, something I can talk about, which kind of goes into the direction of your question, there's a lot of phishing attacks also made against Checkly. And so what I've been doing over the last year is I collected all the phishing attempts, right? Like the funny emails you get, with all the grammar mistakes, but then also there are more sophisticated ones.
Yeah.
So give you an example, we had a new CMO join us, and she had a report who also joined within the same week, and they got a phishing attack on their personal phones from someone from the outside, requesting some information, basically in their first week, right? So the person knew she was the manager, so they knew that and understood that and sent like a relatively clever phishing attempt. And I think especially if you look at technologies like ChatGPT, I think this will get even more dangerous in the future. So yeah, and for that, what I'm preparing is like a little addendum to our security training, where we do also a phishing training based on the real attempts that we have seen.
I've had this training a few times at smaller companies, right, at bigger corporations, and usually it is kind of like, look for the email, look for typos, look if that actually contextual makes sense. I mean, would my manager write me an SMS when we use a chat program every day, right? That seems highly uncommon, but I totally see what you're saying, because sometimes, I mean, a person that is up for a phishing attack is just looking for the weakest point in the chain, right? And could actually be me in a stressful situation, when I'm not on top of my game. These kind of things just can happen. So because we're all humans and we are probably the weakest factor. When things happen, though, how do we limit the risk?
Yeah. We do a couple of things, and again, some of them part of what was required by the SOC 2 compliance, and then others we just do them as part of our ongoing security efforts. So give you a couple of examples. We use 1Password as a password manager, so it's strongly discouraged to send passwords in plain text to someone, right? So usually you use the 1Password share feature. Also, you generate your passwords with it, so you don't have, the 1Password that you use everywhere.
Heard about people doing that.
Yeah, no. We have a proper password manager in place, except maybe sometimes you use SSO, that's also fine. Every service that allows it, we make it mandatory to use MFA. And then also there are some technical things, right? So just recently, after moving the database to Amazon RDS, we moved away from using user password credentials for the database, and now everybody has Amazon IAM credentials to manage those permissions, right? Makes it a little easier and safer if you want to remove permissions. You don't forget that database password somewhere in the corner. Yeah,
for sure.
So those are a couple of things we do.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much all about just keeping the attack surface as tiny as possible, right? You can always do better, but you always have to kind of look for, hey, let's limit all the risk at all possible angles. And well, when things have, sometimes things will just happen. But how do we improve going forward? I mean, I think we're already in a good spot, but what's on the roadmap?
So I had an idea that came from my experience. So I have been an on-call engineer for many years. So I am used to, being an incident captain, going through these stressful situations, handling incidents professionally and all that. So I was thinking, we are already doing sandbox exercises in engineering for on-call engineers. Why not extend this idea to do fun security incident tabletop exercises for everyone, right?
Yeah.
So maybe I pick someone from marketing or, my good friend from DevRel, and I go like, Stefan.
Already freaking out here right now.
You just realized that we have a database leak, right? Accidentally. And this will, of course, happen after the formal security training that we are required to do. But then the expectation is that we regularly exercise, just follow the process, because there's a couple of things you really need to do to professionally handle security incidents, right? It starts with keep the amount of people involved to like the smallest circle that you need to resolve it, right? Because you don't want to spread the information before it's not fixed. And then the next thing is, the CTO needs to be involved. And depending on how bad it is, you need to think about a communication strategy. So think about worst case scenarios, you're leaking customer data. In these cases, after it's fixed, you want to inform the customers, because if you don't, you could be the reason for another security incident of their own. And yeah, there's a couple of things you need to get right. So this is why we are having the training this year.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty much just like practice, right? Because in my experience, doing it once a year is probably not enough, right? Because I read all the things, but if I'm not kind of bringing them in constantly, well, then something happens. You tap onto my shoulder. It's like, hey, Stefan, what you do? And I'm like, yeah, well, let's figure that one out. I mean, it's very tricky.
Yep.
Are you up for a question, Daniel? We have something in chat.
Sure. I think somebody wants those socks really badly, right?
Does Checkly do DAST or SAST upstream or automate pen testing somehow? Now that it's gone SOC 2 Type 2.
Huh. I actually don't know what DAST or SAST are. Never heard those abbreviations. But yeah.
Well, Fonzie, we will catch up with you then afterwards. And we just chatted earlier today in Slack, so we come back to you on that one.
So, yeah. However, what I can say, maybe just a quick one. So we do use surface monitoring tools, and we use Dependabot for dependency vulnerabilities, right? So we have some DevSecOps tools in place, but yeah, I don't know about those abbreviations. Need to read them up later.
Well, every day is a good day to learn something, right? That's kind of. So now that we're SOC 2 Type 2, what does that mean? I mean, we now follow best practices, right? We have more processes in place. And what does it mean for our customers?
So you were able to witness this week, the Checkly synthetic monitoring platform evolves at a breathtaking pace, right? Features are released very quickly, and also massive features. And with the SOC 2 report, we have proven that we can do this. And also at the same time, we are able to keep up very high industry-leading standards of information security. And right, so going back to the question, for that, we utilize a couple of DevSecOps tools like Detectify, and we continuously review the findings, and then also present to our auditors, like I said earlier, right, that we resolve whatever comes up within our SLAs.
Mm. Yeah. Can you tell me what Detectify is? Because I didn't know it before.
Oh, yeah. So Detectify is basically a surface monitoring tool. It's like a automated, lightweight black box pen test, right? So I don't want to take too much away from pen testers because it's definitely not that. But it has a couple of automated checks, right? So best practice, OWASP top 10, logs into your application, tries to find SQL injections and these typical vulnerabilities that companies might have. Yeah, so that's what it does.
Mm. And by building software always depends on dependency, right? We just do whatever install and we pull in a lot of code. We have stuff for that in place too, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I just mentioned, so nothing fancy. We use the GitHub security report and Dependabot for that, right? So same thing. I review those regularly. I take a look, especially at the critical and high ones, and then we fix them depending on other priorities. And sometimes this can mean just going into the CVE and checking, is it really at risk of being exploited? Do we have to fix it now? And then do a risk assessment and decide when to fix.
Yeah, I mean, it's this awareness, though. I worked in teams and at companies where, I mean, Dependabot is enabled in most places, right? But then you have the gazillion pull requests hanging out somewhere, and nobody cares actually. We now kind of like, yep, we look at this, we take this seriously, and we at least we're fixing the most important ones very, very quickly. Cool. So now there's the question here: SOC 2 Type 2. Is there Type 3, Type 4, Type 5? Where we're heading?
Yeah, type infinity, infinite types. No, I think there's actually SOC 3, if I'm not mistaken. It just means that you have to make the report publicly available. In our case, if you want to have our SOC 2 report, then you have to request it via email or through our support. Yeah, but then if the question is what's next, right? So I think we have a few interesting topics. So one that we're actively discussing right now and looking into is using potentially row-level security in a Postgres database. So what that means, the way you can imagine it, every table in the Checkly database has a unique ID for a customer to separate the data. And usually what you do as a developer when you make a query is you add a where clause that filters for that account ID, right? So you don't send any data from another customer back. And we have been discussing putting this security mechanism basically on the database. So even in case you accidentally write a query that doesn't properly filter for the account ID, the database would basically just tell you, hell no, you're not getting that data. And add another level of security here. This is one thing. And yeah, one other thing that's I think is going to be quite fun and interesting. Like I said earlier, we do tabletop incident response trainings with on-call engineers, right? So where I am basically the incident. So what happens is, I go there and I say, hey, login doesn't work. And then engineers, are expected to look at our monitoring logs, dashboards, etc., just to make sure that they have all the access that they need. And then, I make the situation. So I'm like, you see in the S2S queue that there's a piling up of messages. And so what we have been discussing, and we might start doing this year, is having the first simulated incidents where we intentionally introduce a little bug or we break something in the staging environment, and then an on-call engineer would actually have to resolve a real incident as part of their training.
Yeah. I mean, this summarizes the entire topic pretty well, right? You want to limit the attack vector, or right, the things that can go wrong, and if there is additional lockdowns or kind of so what you described with the Postgres database, so that you're not accidentally on the database level can query the wrong data depending on what you do. This is just limiting what could go wrong. And then, yeah, the other part is just practice, 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 right? It is like if you do workshops or if you have the chaos Daniel coming in and saying, hey, this and this is broken, or I do this and this, what's up? I mean, it's just getting used to the practice and learn what to do in what situation. And I think these two are wonderful examples. So, but out of curiosity, now that we had the pen test, that we're SOC 2 Type 2 compliant, when's the next audit and when's the next pen test? How does this whole thing work?
So as part of this, we are audited once a year. So within the next 12 months, we'll get another security audit where we'll have to prove again that we can keep up with all the standards and security controls. And the pen test also needs to happen at least once a year.
So we will have the same conversation next year again when we have the next round. Cool. Thank you, Daniel. I think this was a very, very interesting conversation. I'm getting ready for our security trainings. Hopefully, I'm not the first person that you come from out of nowhere and tap onto my shoulder saying, hey, Stefan, what's up? What should we do here now? But I think that's very good to know. And yeah, I love it that we're on top of our game in terms of security. So thank you, Daniel, very much for joining here today.
Thanks a lot. And then, yeah, have a great day, everyone.
Cool. So I lost my slides on the way. So just give me a moment and I have to jump through everything here right now. We are at the end of the session. So we made it through this launch week and where we are at now. So we talked to Daniel about SOC 2 and security. And as already mentioned, the entire theme of this launch week was code, test, and deploy your entire monitoring setup. So here's a little reminder: if you want to play with the Checkly CLI and want to win something on the way, check out our home office makeover. It is available at chkly.co/giveaway. All you have to do is implement the Checkly CLI, put a GitHub README badge somewhere, and let us know. We will hand out something worth $500 US. And yeah, if you want to connect, we hang out at our Checkly community Slack, which is available at checklyhq.com/Slack. I promise we are a lovely bunch. And there are one or two last things. So as I think that we had the Today I Learned question coming from Fonzie. Fonzie, my friend, I will reach out to you. I know already who you are, so you will get our fancy socks plus a little swag package. And before I head out, I have a last pun for this launch week, and it is themed to the security topic. So what do hackers do on a boat? They're fishing. And with that, I will show myself out. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I had a blast the last 4 weeks. I hope you had a lot of fun. I surely did. And yeah, I think we will see each other online and we will do the next launch week in a couple of weeks. So thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm Stefan, Checkly Stefrelli over here. Have a great week.